Each of the views we just covered tries to fit the millions of years into the Bible, but they all reach the same problem. If the rock layers represent millions of years, and we squeeze these millions of years into Genesis 1, then you can't have a global flood. Why not? Well, because the global flood would have ripped up these rock layers and redeposited them, which gets rid of the very reason for the millions of years. So the church began proposing alternate methods of interpreting Noah's flood. In the 1820s, John Fleming proposed that Noah's flood was a peaceful flood, which was so gentle that it didn't leave any evidence. Anyone who understands water knows that this idea is absurd. So a man named John Pye Smith proposed that the flood was a local flood that only affected the Mesopotamian valley. But this also creates issues of its own. Peter in the New Testament compares the coming judgment of fire to the first judgment of water. But if the first judgment was only local or peaceful, then why would we expect a global violent judgment when Christ returns? Secondly, Genesis says that the waters prevailed so mightily on the earth that all the high mountains under the whole heaven were covered. The waters prevailed above the mountains, covering them 15 cubits deep. Now, if the highest points of the planet are covered up by water, then the rest of the planet has to also be covered in water, because water finds its own level. A local yet mountain-covering flood would look like this. Thirdly, Genesis repeatedly says that the flood's purpose was to make an end of all flesh. End all flesh. Everything that is on the earth shall die. Every living thing he will blot out from the face of the ground. All flesh died. Birds, all swarming creatures, all mankind, everything on the dry land, every living thing, birds of the heavens, blotted out from the earth. If the flood was local, how is it killing the birds? They could just fly away. Fourthly, the action of the flood lasted 150 days. And even after the water stopped rising, it took another 150 days for the water levels to fall again. What local flood lasts for almost a year? Fifthly, if the flood was local, why on earth did God have Noah build a 50-foot-long ark? 500-foot-long ark, He could have told them to simply move away and send animals with them. Why do they need flying creatures? Flying creatures could just fly to a higher elevation. The sixth and most important proof that the flood was global is that God made a covenant after the flood, that this event would never occur again. But if this flood was local, then God broke his covenant, because we experience local floods all the time. This brings us back to the importance of creation in the flood. 6-day creation is a covenant between God and Israel to work for 6 days. The rainbow is a sign of the covenant that God would never flood the earth again. If God didn't create in 6 days, and if the flood was not local, then God broke both of those covenants. So how can we trust this God when he says, "This cup that is poured out for you is the new covenant in my blood"?